Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our final dress rehearsal of the most beloved and the most famous of all Czech operas, Rusalka. Notice it's Rusalka and not Rusalka. All stress in Czech is on the first syllable, which is something I just learned because this is the first major work of art that I've dealt with in the Czech language. And up until, basically 20 years ago, we used to do the whole Czech repertoire, when we did it at all, in German. So perhaps the most famous, the route into Czech opera was by a piece by Smetana, who's called the father of Czech music. His name actually means cream, Mr. Cream, Bedřich Smetana. And it was a piece called The Bartered Bride, which we still do regularly. But we knew that as Die verkaufte Braut, the Bartered Bride. So we know them in German. And it's only with the advent of super titles and wonderful books by people like Tim Cheek at the University of Michigan that singers have learned to sing in Czech. And it's a wonderful language, full of color and sort of Italianate vowels, but fascinating, crunchy groups of consonants. So, for example, they make a vowel out of a flipped R. So one of their vowels is R, and one of their other vowels is an L. Is another vowel. But the most distinctive sound in the Czech language is a combination of a trilled R, at the same time as the sound Z. So let's try that. You're going to go but you have to separate it. So, r, z, r, z, r, z. And then, once you alternate them well, and it happens at the same time. So that's the R with a har check over it. That har check actually means hook. It's that little downward-facing arrow. So his name is Antonín Dvorak. Dvorak. And there it is. So it is a wonderful language, full of color. And you're going to experience it in all of that original vitality. So we think of Dvorak as the most famous of Czech composers, where really for the Czech people, Bedřich Smetana was the father of Czech music. And all Czech music, like Grieg or like Sibelius, is very sort of nationalistic. It's full of national spirit, full of Czech folk music, lots of dance music, and that's prevalent throughout the score. So the main composers are Dvorak and Smetana, but also Leos Janáček, who wrote wonderful operas like The Cunning Little Vixen, Jenufa, Katia Kabanova, Macropolis Case, and Martinu, Bohuslav Martinu, we know as from some of his instrumental music. And we think of Dvorak as a great symphonist. You might know one of his big tunes was turned into a song. It goes like this. It's actually the second movement of his last symphony is ninth. Going home, I'm a-going home, quiet like some still day, I'm just going home. It's not fun, so on, which I actually know as the Hovis bread advert from English commercials when I was a kid. And actually, seeing as we have a watery connection, I'm always amazed by the beginning of the last movement of his Ninth Symphony, which starts. And then it's off into G major, but yes, it always reminds me of another possible watery connection. But he's much more than a symphonist. He's a great lyricist, and he wrote a lot of very famous, very beautiful songs. Perhaps one of his most famous is Songs My Mother Taught Me. Když mě stara matka, śpiewać, śpiewać uczywała. Podziwno, że często slziva. One of my favorite songs of all time. He was blessed with a great melodic gift, Dvorak. And towards the end of his life, he thought that opera was the way forward for the Czech music. And this is his 9th opera. It's the only one we do, but it's actually his 9th opera. So that's Dvorak, that's where he is in history. And what he's surrounded by. He's at the end of the 19th century, so all of that wonderful Wagnerian influence, and the symphony orchestra is at the peak of its powers. So sumptuous effects, so much word painting in the orchestra, and wonderful sort of use of leitmotif system that we get from Wagner. So many sort of themes of Wagner, like the Rhine Maidens and Albrecht at the beginning of the Ring Cycle, are just like the wood sprites and Vodnik at the beginning of this. So the thing that makes this a fascinating piece on more than a musical level is it's based in mythology and the land of fairy tales. And I love this world because it teaches us about the deepest, darkest parts of us as a civilization. And in fact, by sort of a process of evolution linguistically, they've traced many of our fairy tales all the way back to Sumeria, our beginning 7,000 years ago. We've had versions of these tales. So what's this particular fairy tale, and what's it about, and what's it dealing with? Well, it's The Little Mermaid. And I know you're all big Disney fans, so I don't need to tell you the story of that. The Little Mermaid is by Hans Christian Andersen, written in 1837. And you know perhaps the statue in Copenhagen, Hagen, of the Little Mermaid. And when you first see Ariel in the movie, with her red hair, she's sitting on the rock in exactly the same position as that statue. So that's who the Little Mermaid is. But there are fundamental differences between Hans Christian Andersen's tale and Dvorak's tale. So one is the setting. We're not just in the sea. So there you have two elements. You have the water and you have the air when you're in the sea. He moves it to the forest and the lakes so he can add to that element earth and fire. And it's about our natural world and how we relate to it. It exists in 3 different worlds, actually, Rusalka. So we have the 4 elements. And Rusalka, our water nymph, is, of course, part of the water. But later in the opera, she becomes a will-o'-the-wisp. She becomes a bludziczka. So she's composed of air and fire. She lives above the marsh, and she's separated from her world of the water, and she's also separated from earth, separated from the human world. She's separated from everything. So all of these natural elements, the 4 elements, come into this world and how we relate to the natural world. That's difference number 1. Difference number 2, she doesn't dance. So in The Little Mermaid, when she loses the power of speech, when she makes the pact with the sea witch, actually in the Hans Christian Andersen tale, the witch chops out her tongue and gives her a terrible potion that knocks her unconscious for about 3 days. It's quite gruesome, like most proper fairy tales should be. So in this particular one, she isn't, when she receives her legs, blessed with the power of being able to dance. And that's to separate her from everyone else in the opera even further. Because everyone dances in this opera. The wood sprites dance like crazy at the beginning. The humans dance in their castle, in the wedding festivities. Everyone's dancing. Even the witch dances when she's doing her little incantation. So the only person who can't speak and dance is Rusalka. And finally, the ending. The ending is quite tragic, quite profound, symbolic. It's the world of Maeterlinck, it's the world of Pelléas and Mélisande, it's the world of Sigmund Freud that we're plunging into, our connection with our natural earthy selves here. Hans Christian Andersen's tale is full of bribery. So when we get to the end, that tale was originally, a working title was Daughters of the Air. And he scratched out that last paragraph. And what he wrote in is that when they become these will-o'-the-wisps, they become daughters of the air, they're put in a sort of limbo world, and if children are good, their 300-year sentence as a daughter of the air gets a year knocked off it. But if children are bad, then they cry, and every tear costs them a day. And actually, the author of Mary Poppins wrote to Hans Christian Andersen and said, this is pure blackmail, and the children know it, and let you get away with it. So the ending is not sort of a happy ending where finally these daughters of the air receive redemption. It's quite tragic, and she's bound into this limbo forever. So let's explore these worlds a little bit. We have three worlds: the natural world, the crossover to the natural world from the human world, and that's the world of the supernatural, and then the human world over here. Now, the human world happens in Act 2. It's violent, it's passionate, it's confused, it's a little bit messy, whereas the natural world is pure and simple. And the first thing we meet is a representation of the natural world at its happiest. And that's the three wood sprites. And of course, they're singing sort of nonsense words, they're having fun, they're dancing, they're beautiful. One of them has great hair, one of them has a fantastic body, one has beautiful little feet, unlike Rusalka. And they sing, ho, 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 stoi měsíc nad vodou. Stoi měsíc nad vodou. It's like a little Czech dance. Hastrmanku měsíc stoupá, už se tobě v okně houpa, za chvíli se k tobě vloupa, and so on. So you can hear that sort of wonderful dance rhythm. In fact, we get a good Cossack dance. You can see people sort of kicking their legs in that Czech, that Slavic fashion. So that's the world of the wood sprites. It's the natural world. It comes from animism, our habit of investing any natural, inanimate object with a soul. So when I'm trying to vacuum clean, I always swear at the vacuum cleaner because it doesn't do what I want. That's animism. And here, it's the trees we've animated. So in Greek mythology, that would be a dryad. That's who these wood sprites are. So onto our main nymph, a water sprite. And Rusalka isn't a name. It means water nymph. And she is Vodnik, the daddy. She is his favorite daughter, and she has beautiful hair, and she's what we know as a mermaid, or a water person. And we have them in all civilizations, all cultures. They might be sirens, they might be mermaids for us, they might be in German Nixe, Nixon. The most famous Nixe is Lorelei, and she sits on a rock in the Rhine. But all cultures have them. Now in Czech folklore, a Rusalka is a little bit more frightening than the one in this opera. A Rusalka is an unclean spirit. It's generally a drowned woman who's drowned either by being physically drowned by her jealous husband, or she's committed suicide because her husband is unfaithful. There's always a husband involved somehow. Or she's just accidentally drowned. But she's sort of this nasty, wraith-like creature, or almost a bit like those, nasty horror movies, The Ring and The Grudge, that sort of nasty, wet, bedraggled thing that comes out of the television to get you. But a Rusalka is a little bit scary, and she becomes that in the last act. She becomes this sort of wraith-like vision. It's almost the story of how a Rusalka came to be. And her music is terribly lyrical, connected to the moon. She describes herself as a naked wave, and you'll hear the water in her accompaniment. She sings, Leć powolno jsem, mou bytost nesmí žít. That sort of wonderful water music that Rusalka has. She has a theme that you're going to hear throughout the opera. tragic, passionate. It's everything you want in a romantic hero, really. So that's our Little Mermaid. That's Rusalka. But at the beginning, we meet Vodnik. I have here Ben Sieverding, and he is covering the role of Vodnik. And this is Rusalka's dad. And he is what is known in Czech folklore as a hasterman. You can try saying that, it's a good word, a hasterman. And this figure in Slavic folklore was a fascinating character. So if he walked among the humans, he'd be sort of dressed like a bit bohemian, a little bit weird, far out, but definitely human, maybe a top hat. But you could always tell it was a hasterman because there was always water dripping from his coattails. Now, in the German version, he's got gills and he's green, and that's a bit more like the one that we have in our production. And he's connected to the water. He can't leave the water. He's got to have one foot in it. And to this day, Czech fishermen leave a little bit of tobacco in the pond so that the hasterman gives them back fish when they go fishing, because he's always sitting on the bank with his pipe. So he's sort of benevolent, but he can be a bit scary as well, because he comes from the medieval time when people were constantly drowning because no one knew how to swim. Swimming lessons are a modern thing. Back then, why on earth would you swim in some nasty, cold Russian river? Why would you do that? So people didn't know how to swim and constantly drowned, so they invented a little man under the water who pulled people down by their legs, and that's what a hasterman is. And in our culture, that's the troll who lives under a bridge. That's the guy who pulls people into the water and drowns them. It's all connected to the water. And his music is filled with sort of Wagnerian pathos. He sings constantly the words bieda, 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 always 3 times, which means alas, alas, alas. He says, uboha Rusalko bleda, poor pale Rusalka. And he's searching for her. He just has to watch her fate unfold as she goes through this pact. And his music is full of wonderful watery effects as well. Sort of rolling, rippling accompaniments. And you'll hear big sweeping currents in the course of things. So Ben's going to sing you Vodnik's main aria, where he's telling Rusalka in the middle of the castle that she's doomed. She's, even if she loved men 100 times, they'd never love her back in return. They're too fickle for that. So it's a very tragic aria. Dad sort of watching his daughter go towards her doom. And this is Ben Sieverding to sing Vodnik's aria.
Church
Beautiful, watery music. So that's the natural world. And of course, we need a connection from the natural world to the human world. And that is the witch, Yeji Baba. And that comes from the word Baba, which means old woman, a slightly sort of derogatory way. Basically just means witch. So we have Baba the Turk in the Rake's Progress, or Baba Yaga, the Russian witch who lives in a hut in the woods that's built on chicken leg stilts. Is Baba Yaga, and she appears in many legends. And she dances as well. In fact, she sings, the words to her aria are Chudi Mudi Fuk. That's what it means in Czech. That's nonsense language, and it means abracadabra. So you get the pleasure of hearing a mezzo-soprano sing Chudi Mudi Fuk on a B flat, which is very exciting indeed. You'll see that we've been very clever with the super titles, and we changed the last letter so it's not too offensive. But you are hearing it correctly. So that's the witch. And finally, we have the human world, and that's how I want to finish. And the humans are not good people. And that's basically what this story is about. It's our relation to the natural world and how we treat it deeply and sort of psychologically. And it's also a love story and many other things about fidelity. The humans are tricky people. And they're anonymous. We have the prince. We actually have the hunter, this mysterious voice. And you'll hear David actually singing the hunter from offstage. A beautiful sort of evocative moment. The symbol of the white deer that the prince follows. That could be a wood sprite. It could be Rusalka. When he finally encounters Rusalka by the lake. We don't know who this prince's father or mother is. He just falls in love with this wood sprite. And she's torn away from him by a foreign princess, a duchess, probably more powerful than the prince even. And she uses the power of sarcasm and words and singing extremely loudly to wrest Rusalka, who is mute and has no power of words, away from the prince. So this is the prince's wonderful aria which closes Act 1. And you'll hear how it goes from sort of wonderful horn-like music, very human, until Rusalka gets into his blood and we have sort of a watery accompaniment again. So his world becomes more watery in the very course of this aria. This is Vidino Divna. Are you a vision or are you a fairy tale? Isn't it weird that a prince in a fairy tale knows the word for fairy tale? It's very strange. He sings Pohatka, which means fairy tale, an awful lot. David Walton, who is singing The Hunter and covering the prince.
Przyszła list prosić za nim.
Aside from it being just one of the most opulently beautiful of all operatic scores, it really is sumptuous from a musical standpoint. It's a fascinating tale, not just as a fairy tale with all of its implications, but as a piece of symbolism and mystery and magic that tells us so much about ourselves as humans. So you're in for a grand night in the theatre. Enjoy our beautiful production, full of dance, full of colour, full of projections, and let's give one more big round of applause to our two great singers. Thank you.